We wanted to hear from actual voters, so we assembled a group of 6 independents from Tennessee, Oklahoma, Indiana, Michigan, Kansas, and Kentucky to find out what advice they have for President Biden and how they feel about another possible presidential run by Donald Trump. Here now is our Pulse of the People. Show of hands, how many of you believe that Donald Trump will run again in 2024?
Maybe.
2 of you. Okay, why do you think so, Amber?
You know, his ego's like the size of the freaking moon. It's just what he's going to do. And a lot of the people at the top of that party have hitched their wagon to him. So if he runs again, he'll probably get the nomination.
How many of you think that if he chooses to run again, he would win the presidency? Show of hands.
If it were held today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do you think that, Elaine?
A lot of the kind of never-Trumper community are not pleased with the amount of spending and the state of the economy. They're not pleased with some of the social issues that have gone further left. I unfortunately see a lot of the people who didn't vote for him in 2020 would vote for him in 2024.
I think my biggest concern is that some of those never-Trump Republicans who maybe swallowed their pride and voted for Biden or a third-party candidate would just not show up.
How many of you, show of hands, are concerned about something that President Trump has loudly touted along with his Republican allies, and that is election fraud?
Well, election fraud by who? I mean, where was the voter fraud? I mean, the voter fraud was him calling the Secretary of State or the fella Rassenberger down in Georgia saying, can you find me 11,000 votes? That's all I need. I mean, that's voter fraud.
I'm concerned about their allegations of voter fraud. I don't believe that it happens. I think that that's part of the big lie. It is disrespectful to our elections officials who work hard. And administering elections is incredibly complicated and vitally important to having a functional democracy, and for them to come in and spread those lies is just rude and incorrect.
I would agree with the disrespect. I think it's honestly disrespectful to the American people, to everyone that stood in line for hours and hours and hours just to have their vote counted.
I think if you really want to find voter fraud, look at gerrymandering, because that's where it really is. I don't think it's individual votes that are the problem. I think it's the way districts are drawn.
You've got people who want to stay in power and will do anything they need to do it, including drawing the lines and choosing their own voters instead of letting voters choose them.
I just want to caution everybody. We are all, I feel, independent thinkers, and we've not given up our independent thought. But there is a large, portion of our society that believes there was voter fraud. I mean, there are people all over my social media, smart people, teachers, business people, educated white-collar workers. They believe there was voter fraud, and they believe it because of where they get their media and what they have filled their social media with.
Yeah, and that disinformation, again, is a result of partisanship. We've gotten into these information silos, and we tend to be siloed by political party.
Show of hands, how many of you worry that in the midterms or in 2024 that some of those people who acted as guardrails have been replaced, that some Trump and GOP loyalists are being installed?
Yeah, I'm worried. As independents, what we want to make it easier for people to vote. Of course, we're also pushing for the nonpartisan gerrymandering. We're pushing for open primaries, and we're pushing for ranked choice voting. These are all possible solutions.
We've got to fix the system. I want the For the People Act, or whatever derivative or that they're on now, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, things like that restore the rights of voters and not force people into this two-party duopoly that I think all of my cohort here has so eloquently said is ripping apart our country at the seams.
The other thing I see is that the Republicans are, they have organized ruthlessly since 2020. They've passed bills that restrict voting access and restrict voting rights. In Kansas, we had a lot of moderate Republicans in the state legislature. Those are gone for the most part.
I want to go around as a final note and ask you all if you have any advice for President Biden.
My advice is to maintain good communication as we approach the winter regarding this new variant of COVID. Reassure Americans that we can live with this and learn how to conduct daily life with the variant without having to mandate businesses being shut down. I don't want to see any kind of mandates coming back.
What he needs to do is recognize the system that he's been part of is no longer working. He needs to change it. He needs to have open primaries so I can vote as a registered independent voter, and the rest of us, those who are registered independent.
So my advice for the president is to stay the course. I think the fact that he has stayed out of the fray in many ways is good, and certainly fight for our democracy.
Interesting that one woman in the bottom right, her point of make sure you continue to communicate as we go into the winter. It's hard to fight the miscommunication and the misinformation, the disinformation that is plaguing the people who need to hear the message, who aren't really giving the president's arguments credence at all.
They talked about that a lot. They talked about how much they fear the disinformation and how much it has poisoned their lives. She's a small business owner there. She says 2 of her employees refused to get vaccinated. I also thought it was interesting, that's Beth, who you're talking about in the bottom right. I thought it was interesting that she said, basically, we're all critical thinkers, but not everybody are. I mean, I appreciated how rational they were and how much critical thinking they brought to this. But as we know every day, that is also a challenge in the country.
Always fascinating.